You're listening to Remotely We Are One, a podcast to help inspire others to take their lives back from the office commute. I'm Rick, a passionate beer rep who loves the industry but hates the commute.
And I'm Kaleem, a remote work advocate and consultant. We're going to speak with some of the top professionals who have managed to avoid the commute as they share stories from the most inspiring to the most comical, all while working remotely.
Man, this sounds exciting. Let's clock in.
I almost got hypothermia on OSU's campus.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so why did you almost get hypothermia on OSU's campus?
So Ohio State back in the day, it's now illegal because I think someone died. Like, it was a dangerous thing they did. It was called the Mirror Lake Jump. And so before, Ohio State and Michigan have this like really big, like they hate each other, right? And so
the rivalry. Yeah,
the rivalry. So before the Michigan game every year, which is in like November or whatever, like thousands of Ohio State students will run to this pond that they call Mirror Lake in the center of campus, and it's a glorified pond. But they will jump in there, and it's like a party. It's like crazy. Like they used to get like video, these like video production companies would come out and like film a video of it every single year. It was nuts. And so my first time going to OSU's campus, I'm there as a high schooler visiting a buddy of mine's older brother who's a student there, and we rushed Mirror Lake, and then I got lost, wet and cold. I will say I was wearing a Speedo in November. Yeah. Oh. And I could not find my way, and I got lost. I like roamed Columbus's streets in a Speedo in mid-November. I knocked on random people's doors, and I was like, I need help. And they were like, do you need us to call your mom? And I was like, no, I can't. I'm not there yet. If I need you to call my mom, I'll come back. Like, it was, yeah. And someone found me and was like, I know you. Let me take you back to where you're supposed to be, because I didn't have a phone. Like, I was completely lost.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Remotely We Are One. I am your host, Rick Haney, joined by the ever-guzzling Kaleem Clarkson. Hey, Kaleem.
Much better now, man. Much better.
Are we in season 2 now of Remotely We Are One?
You know, we haven't talked about doing season 1 and 2. I don't know how I feel about it. We should probably talk about it, because it's like, do we just keep season 1 and just have 10 million episodes? There's a part of me that kind of likes that.
I like that too. Yeah, it's fluidity.
But yes, to answer your question, yes, it's been a year pretty much.
Yes, and I am coming down off the high of celebrating our first anniversary.
Yes,
as a podcast. We are excited, and I can't think of a better way to send this new spin on its way than our guest today. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I'm a little nervous. I get a little nervous about each guest, but this one makes me nervous because this dude's got, maybe the number 1 rated remote work podcast out there, right?
Yes, it's time for us to duck back in the shadows, because today we're about to get shown up. I'm pretty sure, which is fine with me.
Yeah,
you guys are making me blush. Yeah, I gotta jump in here and say I like to, this is very nice of you guys.
See, listen to him. He's
already showing us up.
Yeah, I mean, he has better hair than both of us. You know what I mean?
He has more hair than you and I combined.
I mean, he's definitely more fit.
I am Eastern European, so the hair thing comes. It
works.
Yeah.
He's still using hairspray, though. He's still using hairspray and gel and shit. Don't let him fool you. But today's guest, who you hear, smiling and looking good over there, he was born in Bulgaria, Rick. He was born in Bulgaria. Yep.
Okay.
But he's been an Ohioan since he was 10. Shout out to Cincinnati, where he's from. Cincinnati.
Whoop, whoop, whoop.
There it is.
Yep.
He almost got hypothermia once after jumping in a pond wearing a Speedo at Ohio State University.
Yeah, see, we'll get into this, but I'm curious as how one almost gets hypothermia. I mean, you either have hypothermia or not. But so the question becomes, when does the doctor say, another 38 seconds and you'd have had hypothermia? You know what I mean?
Listen, Rick. I never went to the hospital, okay? But sometimes, if I just say I was really cold once in a Speedo at Ohio State, it doesn't sound as good as I think I almost got hypothermia once.
Well, technically, being really, really, really cold is almost hypothermia. So
yeah, there you go. It's almost
I'll give you credit where credit's due.
I mean,
it's
a pond in November in Ohio, that shit's cold. Right?
Yeah,
You know
I mean,
what
you could get hypothermia in June in a pond in Ohio, much like you can in Maine.
For reals. Also, Rick, something else about our guest, right? He's been traveling since 2016 and has worked remotely from 30 different countries. So he knows what he's doing.
Ah, damn. Oh, wow. We're going to learn a thing or two today, I can tell you that.
I hope so. I hope he learned something. You know,
I'll tell you the interesting bit about that I think is more interesting than the fact that I've been traveling since 2016 is that I've done it with my wife. So ever since we got started, you know, most people get started as a digital nomad on their own. I started with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. So that's been interesting.
That makes the story even better.
It does. I guess wifey's also an influencer. Throw out the Instagram. Get her some extra followers.
Her Instagram is Life of Sarah Jane. She's very good.
Life of Sarah Jane.
Mm-hmm. Jane, yes. Sarah with an H. I found out since I met the H and the no H Sarah. It's like a thing. Like you're either like a Sarah with an H or I didn't know this. Yeah.
She's got two first white lady names. It's perfect.
It's true. Yeah.
Sarah
Jane is a white lady from Michigan. So yeah.
Holy shit. No, it's what we do here. It's what we do. All right. So I throw stereotypes all the time. Just don't hate me. Don't hate me. Last but not least, he's the founder and host of That Remote Life podcast, Mitko Karshovski.
All right.
Nailed it.
Welcome to the show.
Nailed it.
Thanks
for being on with us, man. Thanks for being on with us.
Yeah. I'm excited to be on here. This is fun.
Yeah, it's great to talk to a fellow podcaster. I'm excited to have you. Where I really want to jump off is, so in your first episode that you ever recorded on this podcast, That Remote Life, you told the story about dropping out of school, college rather, and then doing some business ventures, and then you discovered the term digital nomad. Can you talk a little bit about, because we've talked to digital nomads on this show before. Mm-hmm. I want to hear how you experienced hearing that term for the first time and how it changed your life.
Yeah. So you started saying the first episode of my show and I was like, oh my God, like what did I say? I don't remember. This was such a long time ago.
Damn, Rick, that was a deep question too, baby.
That was a deep question.
I can't wait to hear this shit.
Yeah.
Listen up, everyone.
The thing with that is, so like I said, I was born in Varna, Bulgaria. And when I moved to the United States, right, I did so when I was 10 years old. And at that age, I already had a personality in Bulgaria when I moved to the United States. So I already had this experience of like living somewhere and actually remembering what that was like and then living in the United States. So when I was growing up, I could just never picture myself living just in this one place and I'm going to go to work, 20 minutes from my house. And like, just, I'm going to exist in this bubble, right? I just could not picture that. I always wanted to do something that was far more global. I always really wanted to travel, but I didn't know how does that all click together. And I'm a very ambitious guy. I love entrepreneurship. I love building things on the internet. And I didn't know how those two things could coexist together. And then I heard the term digital nomad, and it was like, I call it my Pandora box, because everything just clicked for me. And I was like, oh my God, there's people who do the sort of thing that I want to do. That's so crazy. And then it's kind of like you type it into Google and you're like, oh, here's this person who has a blog and so on and so forth. And so for me, it really was a moment where I was like, okay, there's a different way of doing life and I want to do it this way.
Wow. And this was long before the pandemic where everybody started doing their own thing.
Yeah, I think I heard the term digital nomad in 2015. I was in Europe traveling, I think, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
It took me about a year to start traveling. And in 2016, it was kind of like, I'd say like a soft launch. And in 2017 was when I was like officially, I had like income and I was off.
That's awesome, man. I mean, everybody wants to know, what was your first, 4-hour work week income hustle to be a digital nomad, man? What was the first one? Because we know there was more than one. I mean, come on. I mean,
Yeah.
we're trying to figure it out. What was it?
So I got started in e-commerce, and so I had do you know what
Nice.
a kegerator is?
What?
A kegerator?
Yeah, I make my living on kegerators.
Of course,
There you
we
go.
know what
That's what I do.
kegerators
Okay.
are. Absolutely,
So-
love them.
I was trying to drop ship kegerators, and everyone that I worked with was like, that's a really bad idea because they're really heavy. And I was like, you don't know anything. I'm going to bust this market. Watch me. Well, lo and behold, it didn't work out because they were too heavy to drop ship. But in the process of kind of building out that e-commerce store and doing all the things, I actually got to meet some people who had very successful e-commerce stores. And those people ended up hiring me on to work for their business. They sold it was I don't know if you've ever heard the term Amazon FBA, but it's essentially an e-commerce business where it's fulfilled by Amazon. And they sold adult coloring books, which is not what it sounds like. It's like geometric shapes that you color in.
Yeah.
It's supposed to help you calm down.
Calm down and relax and stuff. Definitely.
Yeah. And so they had a store, they had a business that sold that, printed and sold those. And I came in as their only hire, and I was doing mostly content. So I was writing I've probably written over 100 blog posts about coloring books.
Anything we should know about coloring books that you remember?
There's really nothing that I don't know. That's it. I haven't really thought too much about coloring books since then.
Purple and red don't go together. I mean, like nothing.
I don't know. Coloring books. I don't know, man. This is not
That's great.
I know there was a big thing about how thick the paper is, because that matters, because otherwise it bleeds through on the other side.
Right,
yeah, I remember there was
yeah. That's super cool, man. That's super
Well,
cool.
I'm fascinated with that you started out with kegerators. I work with kegerators every day.
You're a beer. You work as like a beer distributor or something, right? Am I?
Well, yeah, I own a business that I build custom kegerators.
For real?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm always looking for like the next best thing. I do a couple of different things, but right now that's my main focus is trying to launch this business. And I know how heavy they are. Believe me.
Cause you do. So you're traveling around, you're kind of like this digital nomad. What made you start the podcast, that Remote Life podcast? Like, you have great rankings, you're out there, and I was psyched when the dude was like, yeah, I'll be on your show, bro. I was like, what?
Yeah.
What? We got a top dog. Yes, you're a digital nomad, but you weren't working for a major corporation that sponsors the podcast, which lots of podcasts are sponsored by companies and stuff. So what made you come up with the idea, number one? And then number two, how were you able to start getting some of your guests? I mean, you've had some great guests. You've had Chase on the show, right? Yeah.
Chase Warrington?
Yeah,
He's been on the podcast like 5 or 6 times. He's probably getting sick of being on the podcast. Yeah.
He's rich. He's rich.
Yeah. So how have you been able to get all of these guests, man? And first question, what made you start the podcast, and how are you getting these great guests, man?
So I really like podcasting. It's actually how like you mentioned, I dropped out of college. And so for me, podcasting was a huge part of my education. You know what I mean? Where I would listen to everything and then experiment and test it. And so I came to truly love the medium because it played such an important role in my education in my life. And I've always been a talker. And so I always thought that's something that I could do myself. And it's something that I really wanted to do. And I kept talking about it. And then 2 friends of mine who had podcasts of their own that were very successful, Jason Moore from Zero to Travel and Travis Sherry from Extra Pack of Peanuts, which together at one point were the number 1 and 2 travel podcasts in the world. So they're very good friends of mine and early mentors. And
what are the chances, bro? What are the chances that you connected with them and they're the top podcasters? That's unbelievable.
Well, they had a community. So they had a community called Location Indie, which was one of the first communities for digital nomads. And I joined that community and just, started interacting, and we got along, and I met them in person. They had an event in Denver if I remember correctly. And I had been talking about this podcast, talking about it, and Jason, I remember very well. He was like, "Hey, when are you gonna like shut up and like do the thing?" You know? And he said,
Yes.
"I'll
Shut
be
up and do
I'll
it,
be your
baby.
first podcast." Yeah. So he said, "I'll be your first guest," and he is my first guest. And so we sat down and we started from there.
That's awesome.
That's super cool,
And so
bro.
that's how the podcast started. In terms of like how I get guests, honestly, I've tried to make a system out of it and it doesn't work. It's all about like, I'm curious. I want to know, like, you're somebody who's interesting to me, who is doing something I want to talk to you, or there's like a topic that I'm interested in. And I want somebody to teach me about it. And I think one thing that I maybe do that other people don't is I just shoot my shot. Like I have this thing where like friends of mine that I've watched, they have this like moment where they're about to like send an email, for example, and they're just sitting there and like rereading the email, and they like hover over the enter button, and they like, it takes them forever to do it. I heard, this is weird, I heard Steve-O once say, Steve-O from Jackass.
I was gonna say, are you referencing Jackass, bro? Are you referencing Jackass on our podcast right now, bro?
I am. Steve-O once said that the secret to him doing all that crazy stuff is he counts to 3 and he does it, and he doesn't overthink it. And I was like, that's actually a really good, kind of like way to look at it. So I'm going to reach out to this like really big person and I'm nervous about it. And I just 1, 2, 3 and I click. Right. And so I will just shoot out emails to people who probably, I think other people are afraid to reach out to for some reason, or not afraid, but like they talk down to themselves in some way. And so there's really no secret. I just reach out to people. And, it also, the other big thing too is over time, it becomes easier, right? Like you get one big name and then that makes other people feel more comfortable with it.
That
and,
is so true.
so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But I had people in the beginning, for example, who told me like, "Hey, when you hit 25 episodes, give me a call," right? Like I'd reach out to them and want them on the show, and they would say like, "No, like I don't know if you're going to keep going with it." So I've had that happen before.
Wow. I started in podcasting with a totally different show. It was like a bike BMX 1980s culture fest, and it was based on a 1980s BMX film. And I actually got in touch with the guy who starred in the movie, and I said, "I don't have any episodes. I have a concept. You were the star of this movie. Do you want to do a podcast with me?" And he's like, "Yeah, send me a sizzle reel or something." And I'm like, "Wait,
Yeah,
I actually have to do this now? Oh shit." And it is what it is. We ended up doing it and had a good time.
I think podcasting is still such an undiscovered tool for creating like a brand and for getting access to people that you shouldn't otherwise have access to.
Yeah, I like that. Access.
Because like, yeah, and it's like it works from like a business point of view as well, where I used to work for an HVAC marketing company. That was like my longest stint, was I was their head of operations. And one of the things that we always talked about was, hey, we're trying to like get into these like bigger accounts. Why don't we start a podcast interviewing the people, the directors of those bigger accounts? Because now we're getting like immediate access to them and we're leading with value instead of being just another marketing company that's trying to like get access to them or like get them to pay for something.
Okay.
So that it works in that way from a business standpoint. But also if you're somebody who wants to get hired for a specific type of job, at a company, start interviewing those people that are going to be making those decisions and have good conversations with them. And you're just immediately one step ahead of anyone else who might be applying, and you're developing credibility in that industry.
Credibility in the industry. That's interesting.
Even if you're not like looking for, like I want to have like the #1 podcast and like whatever, I think it's an incredible tool that people don't use enough.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about, absorbing all like everything that everybody's talking to you on your show, and just kind of absorbing everything that they're saying and listening to every word and all that. Now that you're into this and you're really diving deep on a lot of these conversations and you're kind of putting that new information out there, do you feel like you're almost in a way becoming a thought leader at this point? And how does that compute in your head?
I don't feel like a thought leader. I'm not someone like my wife, like we talk about this a lot, that I don't give myself credit.
I was just gonna say, bro.
Yeah.
And to some extent, it's probably not psychologically healthy to not give myself credit, but it keeps me motivated because I'm always trying to be, to be better or whatever. So I don't feel like a thought leader. I appreciate you folks insinuating that, but it's for me, what I like now is like that I'm at a point where I get to have really exciting conversations because I feel like I know. So there's this really interesting concept of like imposter syndrome, and that imposter syndrome is actually a good thing because it tells you that. Well, so have you ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect?
I just laugh my way through things.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard of Dunning-Kruger. Yeah.
And so that's what's really exciting is that when you have imposter syndrome, you're entering a space where you know enough to know how much there is to know, right? So that's why you feel imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And I definitely have that, but I feel myself at a place where I can have really good conversations now because I at least know the material and what's going on enough that like I can actually have strong conversations, right? So that's been really exciting in like the last couple of, like the last like year or so. I feel like we've started having some really, really fun conversations and diving into some like really cool topics that I'm very excited to explore.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here, Mitko, because basically I appreciate, what's the word? You being so humble. I appreciate that. But listeners, viewers, we're not just bringing on somebody that just some random person. You know what I mean? We're not just bringing some random person for you all to hear these stories. I disagree, man. And why I disagree is because my colleague here, and maybe he can talk a little bit more about his experience. The first person I called in my mind when I wanted to start a podcast was Mr. Rick Haney, because you can hear his smooth voice. And
he does have a smooth voice.
Yeah, I mean, it's smooth.
Not enough O's and smooth.
No. And he's done podcasting before. And his first thing was, bro, I don't know anything about remote work. And when you talk to people, and as a consultant, like the reason why I feel like I am an expert, the reason why I feel like, I've had certain accolades is because I've had these conversations with so many people. And just you talk about it and you learn. I mean, that's how you learn. You talk, you have conversations, you have inquiry is how you learn, right? So I 100% disagree with you. I think you're cutting yourself short. And I think we will see you as the head of remote at a company very soon. I really do feel like that's going to happen very soon. So, Rick, do you have any thoughts about that yourself? Like your experiences?
I don't know shit. Let's just throw that out there.
Let's do it, yeah.
But however, I will. I didn't know shit. I still don't know shit. But I know a lot more shit than I did when I started. Let's put it that way.
There you go.
And the thing about it is I've been inspired through all these, just like I'm sure you can say the same thing, Mitko, is that you get talking to these people and you learn, and then you start to think differently. And then once you start thinking differently, your conversations go differently. And then all of a sudden you're in this new space where you know shit.
Well, and the other thing too is like remote work is now mature and it's such a young space, right? So that's one of those things where it's just developing and it's very exciting to talk about it and to like kind of like almost help not like necessarily form it, but to like it's very exciting that it's like developing right now. And we're all kind of having a part in it by having the conversations and connecting people or whatever it may be. We're like actively helping form it, and to me that's like really exciting. And if anyone's listening, by the way, who is like wanting to get into remote work, there has never been a better time, because there's like even the experts haven't been experts for that long. Do you know what I mean? It's not like marketing where somebody wrote a book like 80 years ago that's still referenced or whatever. It's like remote work is like brand new.
Well, I mean 65. But I hear what you're saying. Your
Yeah.
point. The point is you're 100% accurate. There hasn't been years and years and years and years of research on this, and the research is really coming out now. You're 100% correct. And if you want to get involved, I say do it. I got to follow up. What has been like, and I know that this is kind of a lame question. What's been your best guess? I won't do that. But what are some of the bigger kind of like lessons that you feel like that you've taken from your show, or surprises? Because I feel like there are a good amount of remote work podcasts, and everyone out there knows that Rick and we're trying our best to make you laugh a few times and learn something. So that was kind of like we're trying to do. But there's certain episodes, and we tried to do a review earlier in the year of what message really stuck with us, and it was kind of difficult. It was actually pretty hard. So not to put you on the spot, but what were some of the lessons that you learned?
I think what's really interesting is I feel like there's like an overlap or a convergence of topics that before I looked at as being separate topics that to me now seem to have a much larger overlap. And there were topics that I explored on the podcast, and I was even worried about like having the episodes on there. And I'm like, does this like really follow the same trend? I don't know, but it's really curious. And I'm going to use the like platform, whatever platform I have, to get somebody to talk to about this, because I'm just curious. And now in retrospect, right, like Steve Jobs has that really great speech about connecting the dots. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like they're coming together. Because to me, the digital nomad space, entrepreneurship, Web3 and crypto, remote work, like these things are like concepts that some of them don't necessarily seem that connected, but now are starting to converge. And I think the very interesting things happen where those points converge. And that to me is very interesting and surprising. And that's what I look out for, right? Like when I see a project like Kaleem, we talked about this on my podcast about like some of these project management slash like co-ownerships of projects that are happening in terms of like async work built on top of the blockchain. That's so cool. And even if it's like 5 years away from having something that hits like, has like legitimate product market fit, that's such a cool like these are such cool things that are being built right now. So I think that's kind of like the most exciting, interesting thing from the podcast is just those convergence points.
I think that makes sense.
Wow. Yeah. Never really thought that deeply about it, but that's where all the little nuggets are.
I mean, let me give you an example.
Gems.
Like a lot of people are talking about like taxation and digital nomads and remote work. Like, how does that work, right?
Right.
The easiest, if we were to like break down the whole issue, if we were to shed any sort of weight that we've built of taxation up to this point, and we're to say, okay, we have this technology, we have this problem, how do we solve it? The actual best way to solve it is through cryptocurrency and having each city or each country have their own coin, that when you travel there, you pre-purchase that coin. And then when you use the infrastructure, you just micro pay for it, right? So essentially you go to the park, there's a little scan thing for you to come in, you pay like a cent and you get to use the park. You drive on the roads, you have like a little thing that plugs into the car that tracks how many miles you drive. And so that amount of the coin gets paid out of your account to cover the road wear and tear that you contribute. And that is like the fairest, simplest way to do taxation if people are traveling around, right? Because if I travel to this country, I'm not necessarily contributing the amount of money that I should be in terms of taxes based on the infrastructure that I'm using. And so that kind of thing is what I'm talking about I'm not saying that's something that's going to happen in 5 years. We are seeing some city coins, but that's like, I think like how interesting is that we now have that technology to do stuff like that.
Well, it just blows my mind that we're even talking about that.
Crypto and taxation.
Yeah, I know.
Remote work, baby.
But you see how that's like not remote work, but it kind of is, because remote work is enabling. Do you know what I mean? Like that's what I mean by those convergence points.
I mean, it's that remote life, bro.
Yeah,
it's that remote life.
So I've got a quick question. I'll try to make it quick because I know we're running short on time. But you've talked to a lot of people of all levels of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
You know a little bit about my background, and you have a similar background, with the kegerator thing. What advice could you lend to somebody like me? I've been in the beer industry for 20 years now. Okay. I'm almost embarrassed to admit that. And my job is more of a hybrid role at present. I want full remote. I want to do my own thing fully remotely. I don't even care at this point if it's in the beer business or not. What advice can you give to someone in my shoes to say, this is when you should take the leap? This is what you need to do in order to make that happen.
Yeah. So I would give you the same advice that I'd give someone who is trying to start a business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is focus on who you help, not how you help them. Because when you focus on who you help and you keep that as the core, what you do or how you help them can change over time, but you're never starting from zero. You're always going to have social equity with that group, and they're going to have trust. If you're constantly switching who you help, like what sort of, what industries you're working with, your network is going to change. Your name isn't going to carry the same weight because you're jumping industries, right? So I think when you're working remotely, one of the pros and cons is distributed opportunity, right? Like anyone can apply for any job, which sounds amazing, but when you think about it, anyone can apply for any job. So there's a lot more competition in terms of jobs, which means that in order for you to cut through the noise, you need to have a very clear signal, and you need to spend time to think about, okay, who do I want to work with? Whose problems am I curious about, and whose problems do I want to solve for the next 10, 20, 30 years? And then work your way into that industry and find your position remotely in that way. And so like, I usually like when I'm, cause I've coached like businesses and freelancers in the past, I use a framework called DFPP, discovery, focus, pattern, productize. And I would focus in terms of like, we don't have to go down that route if it doesn't connect with like the show, but I would focus on the discovery, like find that industry. And the most important part is whose problems are you interesting to you? Whose problems are you curious to solve? And then work from that angle as opposed to trying to think of like, what should I do?
Wow. So it's more of like almost like a service-based endeavor. When you lead with
jobs
service,
are becoming more entrepreneurial. Jobs are going to be far more entrepreneurial in the future because you have essentially, if you imagine like a funnel or like a triangle, right? Like an inverted triangle. On one side, you have outsourcing, right? Kaleem, you and I talked about this on my podcast, where a lot of these jobs that were maybe going to hire paid people are now, they're like, hey, I've got somebody who's willing to do this for, 30% less. I'm going to send it over there, even if they do the job just as well. On the other side of it, you have automation. And so both of these things are squeezing the job market from both sides. And what you're finding in the middle is actually going to be a much larger, what you would have seen a lot of like 9-to-5 full-time jobs. I think it's going to be closer to some sort of long-term contracts where you come in for like 12 to 18 months, work on this until it gets to a point where it can be outsourced or automated, and then you move on to the next large contract. It's a little bit like Naval Ravikant talks about in terms of like, hunt like a lion, not like a cow. And that's how we are meant to be as species, but we have fallen since the like early 20th century into working in this 9-to-5. Like I'm going to go and work at this career for 30 years. And so if you focus on who you help, those contracts, right? Those 12 to 18 month things, you're constantly not going to zero because you're not starting over. You're just hitting the same industry. You've already developed trust in that industry.
Well, I don't know how you feel about this, but you just became my coach. So you got some work to do.
You weren't planning on. I mean, what you said, it makes a lot of sense. And we've talked about this early on, not like you just articulated, like, holy smokes. Like, focusing on yourself as what it is that you want to do and who you want to help. And then just going to those people and building those networks in those spaces. When you hear someone just say it like that, it makes so much sense. But it's hard to even cut through a lot of the noise and hear it. It makes a lot of sense, man.
And I think to that point, personal brand is going to be like, we've heard about that now for about 10 years with a lot of, you have like Gary Vee talking about whatever, but right now it's becoming way more important to everyone who wants to have a career. Like everyone is going to have some sort of brand. It's part of your leverage, right? The main leverage points of like a worker are, how much attention and credibility you have, right? Those are leverage points that you can use to get jobs or whatever it may be. And you need to build up that personal brand to have more leverage on those points.
You have 10 million followers on Instagram. That's why you can get paid like that.
Not even 10 million, man. And nowadays with like 10,000 even 1,000 in the right industry, you can move mountains.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. We're going to have a separate conversation sooner than later.
You hear that, everyone? Get on that personal brand. Get on that personal brand. I agree. He's hitting all the points real hard. Get on that personal brand.
Oh, yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Well, hey, Mitko, do us a favor. Share with us an experience throughout your career working remotely that you found to be the most memorable, comical, or inspiring.
Ooh, the part of the show, baby. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're getting to the show. Oh, yeah. The show.
Can I give you two? A comical and an inspiring?
Anything you want, brother. Anything you want.
Love it. Love it. So, comical wise, we talked about this with Kaleem. He wanted me to bring it on. I did have a guest that when we were doing the podcast who showed up in a suit, and I commented, and I was like, wow, I feel, because I wear t-shirts. I have one suit for like weddings. I was like, wow, you're like so professional. I feel a little bit underdressed. And before we hit record, he stood up and it was like, business up top, party down below. And he was like wearing boxers. Like he was just rocking like the suit and a shirt and a tie, but no pantsuit or anything like that. And I was like, that's kind of awesome. I love that energy. So that was the comical thing that I wasn't expecting. But in terms of inspiring, this is one of those things that my wife and I realized, and it's when we became digital nomads. My wife's family is very conservative, like Catholic, and when some Eastern European boy showed up in their life who was like, "Hey, we're gonna travel the world and work online in 2016," and her parents were like, "I don't." I'm not so sure about this, but what ended up happening was when we started to, have careers and make money, and then we're able to go back home, and we were able to go spend 2 weeks with them for Christmas and actually be there and be present and hang out with them. And they realized that they saw us in those 2 weeks, like they saw us more than some of their friends see their kids who are technically working steady jobs in the United States. They got it. And my wife loves this story about how, at first her parents were kind of like, I don't really know. I don't get this like weird life. And then now her parents are like the proudest parents. They tell everyone like, my kid is a digital nomad. She works her, like they love it. And so to me, the digital nomad thing, a lot of people talk about like traveling to tropical locations and whatever. My thing is spend wherever your time is most important. My grandma's 93 years old. I don't know how much time I have left with her. I've gotten to spend more time with her in Bulgaria since I became a digital nomad than I thought would be possible. And that's what it's all about. Is remote work is all about spending your time how you want to. And so I think that's something that a lot of people miss from like the Instagram reels.
Professional, bro.
Fantastic stuff.
You hit us in the fields, bro.
Oh,
you hit us in the fields with 93-year-old grandma. You making me feel real bad. I'm coming to visit. I'm coming to visit.
All right, man. We'll make some Bulgarian food for you.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to pour my heart out in an email, so be on the lookout for that in the next hour. Mitko Karshovski, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, this was fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. Where can our listeners and viewers find you online?
ThatRemoteLife.com. That's where you'll see the podcast. I'm starting to write a lot more on there as well. And then I'm on all the socials at Mitkoka, Mitkoka.
Ooh, Mitkoka.
Mitkoka. Which is interesting. My friends have started calling me Coco now. Which I don't know how I feel about Coco, but yeah, I'm getting more active on LinkedIn as well now, so you can find me there as well.
Awesome. Well, you've been a super sport putting up with our bullshit for the last hour. I appreciate it.
Hey, this is fun. This has been a blast.
I mean, Coco, you're looking great, baby. You're looking great, Coco.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We will certainly be in touch, and don't be a stranger. Come back around. We'd love to have a conversation with you again.
Whenever you'll have me.
Anytime.
Perfect.
All right, man.
Perfect.
Peace.
You've been listening to the Remotely We Are One podcast. Visit us at remotely1.com/podcast for upcoming episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and download our episodes on your favorite podcast app.
Hey, don't forget to clock out.